The hidden truth. Sarah Montgomery lived in a luxury penthouse worth $12 million in downtown Chicago. She had wealth, power, a perfect reputation, but she hadn't felt healthy in years. Constant dizziness, breathing problems, her heart racing at random moments, sleepless nights that stretched into dawn. Every doctor told her the same lie: "You're perfectly fine." Until Marcus Johnson, a single father who cleaned her apartment after midnight, discovered something small, something hidden, not a disease, not stress, a secret habit she'd never admitted to anyone. If the truth came out, would Marcus lose his job, or would he save her life? Marcus Johnson arrived at the Sterling Tower every night at 11 sharp. His beat-up Toyota sat in the underground garage while he took the service elevator to the 38th floor. The hallways always smelled like lemon cleaner and someone's expensive candles. He'd been cleaning penthouses for 3 years now. The pay was better than most night jobs, and the hours let him be there for his daughter. Jasmine was 8 years old. She had her mother's warm smile and his deep brown eyes. She stayed with his mom during the week at their house in Bronzeville, and he picked her up every morning before school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and stable mattered more than anything. The penthouse belonged to Sarah Montgomery. He'd seen her face on billboards around the city. She ran some tech company that made hospital software. He didn't understand exactly what it did, but he knew it made her incredibly wealthy. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, marble everywhere, furniture that looked like museum pieces, everything white or glass or polished steel. Marcus had a key and a security code. He let himself in and started in the kitchen like always. The sink was spotless. One coffee mug sat upside down on a towel. He wiped the counters anyway. That was the job. The living room was perfect. Couch cushions arranged just so. Coffee table empty except for a remote control lined up exactly parallel to the edge. He vacuumed even though the carpet showed no footprints. The apartment always felt too clean. Not clean like someone just tidied up. Clean like nobody really lived there, like a showroom. Most apartments he cleaned had signs of life. A jacket on a chair, mail on the counter, shoes by the door. But Sarah Montgomery's penthouse had none of that. It was controlled, sterile. Marcus didn't mind. It made his job easier. He moved down the hallway, 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom door stayed closed. That was the rule. He never went in there. The other rooms were empty except for a treadmill in one and a desk in the other. He was wiping down the guest bathroom mirror when he heard it. A cough, sharp and wet, coming from behind the master bedroom door. Marcus froze. He'd been cleaning this apartment for 7 months and had never heard her cough before. He'd barely seen her at all. She was usually gone by the time he arrived, or she stayed in her room with the door shut. They'd spoken maybe twice. The cough came again, longer this time. It sounded painful. Marcus stood in the hallway holding his cleaning supplies. He told himself it wasn't his business. She was a grown woman with access to the best doctors in Chicago. He was just the guy who cleaned her floors. But the cough didn't stop. It went on for almost a minute, harsh and relentless. He heard her gasping for air between fits. He set the spray bottle down and walked to the door. He knocked lightly, "Miss Montgomery." No answer, just more coughing. He knocked again, louder. "Miss Montgomery, are you okay?" The coughing stopped, silence for a few seconds. Then her voice came through the door, tight and strained. "I'm fine." Marcus didn't move. He'd heard that tone before. His wife used to say the same thing near the end when her lungs were failing. "I'm fine. Always I'm fine." "Do you need water?" Marcus asked. "I said I'm fine." He heard movement inside. Footsteps. Something being set down hard on a surface. Then the door opened a crack and Sarah Montgomery looked out at him. She was younger than he expected. Mid-30s maybe. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore a t-shirt and sweatpants. Her face was pale with dark circles under her eyes. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Marcus shook his head. "You didn't. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine," she said again. "Just a cough, it happens." She started to close the door, but Marcus spoke before she could. "You should drink some water. It helps." Sarah looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "Thank you." She closed the door softly. Marcus stood there for a few seconds, then picked up his supplies and went back to work. He finished the rest of the apartment in silence and took the elevator back down. But he couldn't stop thinking about that cough. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus started noticing things. Small things, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. There were always mints on the kitchen counter, not in a bowl, just loose, scattered near the coffee maker, 5 or 6 at a time. He threw them away and wiped down the counter. The next night there would be more. The guest bathroom trash always had tissues in it. Not many, just a few crumpled at the bottom. He'd assumed she had a cold, but it had been 2 weeks and the tissues kept appearing. Then there was the air purifier. It sat on the floor near the balcony door, small, about the size of a shoebox, running constantly. He'd never thought much of it before. Lots of people in Chicago used air purifiers. But one night Marcus noticed the filter looked brand new. He checked the model number and looked it up on his phone during his break. The filter was supposed to last 6 months. This one had been replaced recently. He could tell because there was no dust, no discoloration. Pristine. He started paying closer attention. Sarah always had a bottle of mouthwash in the guest bathroom, even though she didn't use that bathroom. The windows were always open, even in the middle of January when temperatures dropped into the 20s. The balcony door was unlocked every night. And he noticed the smell, faint. So faint he almost missed it, but it was there, lingering near the sliding door, near the air purifier. A sharp chemical smell mixed with something burnt. Marcus knew that smell. He'd grown up around it. His father had smoked 2 packs a day until he died of a heart attack at 53. His wife had smoked 2 before she got sick. She quit when the doctors told her to, but by then the damage was done. He knew what cigarette smoke smelled like even when someone tried to cover it up. Marcus didn't say anything. It wasn't his place. Sarah Montgomery was a private person, and he was just the man who cleaned her apartment. If she wanted to smoke, that was her choice. But the cough kept getting worse. One night Marcus was cleaning the secondary balcony. It was smaller, tucked around the side of the building where most people didn't go. There was a single chair, a small metal table, and a dead plant. He swept the floor and wiped down the railing. Then he moved the chair to vacuum underneath it. That's when he saw it. A plastic bag folded tightly and shoved behind the outdoor air conditioning unit. He pulled it out and opened it. Inside were cigarette butts, at least 20 of them, maybe more, wrapped in tissue, stuffed into the bag, tied shut. There was also a small glass ashtray, wiped clean but still stained with ash. Marcus stared at the bag for a long time. He thought about his wife, about the way she used to hide her cigarettes in the garage, in the toolbox, in the pocket of an old jacket, about the way she used to chew gum and spray perfume and open every window, trying to make sure no one would know. He thought about the last year of her life when her lungs gave out, and she couldn't walk 10 feet without gasping for air. He thought about Sarah Montgomery coughing behind her bedroom door, hoarse and breathless and alone. Marcus put the bag back where he found it. He finished cleaning the balcony, put his supplies away, and locked the door behind him. But he didn't leave. He stood in the hallway outside the penthouse for a long time, staring at the door. He knew what he had to do. He just didn't know if he had the right to do it. Marcus didn't sleep well that night. He went home, checked on Jasmine, ran his hand gently over her braids as she slept, then sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee he didn't drink. He kept thinking about the bag of cigarette butts. He kept hearing Sarah's cough through the door. He told himself it wasn't his problem. She was an adult. She made her own choices. He was a cleaning worker, not a doctor, not a friend. He had no right to get involved. But the next night when he arrived at the penthouse, he couldn't stop himself from checking the secondary balcony again. The bag was still there. He left it alone and went back inside. Sarah was home. He could hear her moving around in the master bedroom. The door was closed as always. He cleaned the kitchen, the living room, the guest bathroom. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting. He was wiping down the glass coffee table when he heard footsteps behind him. "Marcus." He turned around. Sarah stood in the hallway wearing a blazer and jeans. She looked like she'd just come back from somewhere. Her hair was down and she had makeup on, but it didn't quite hide the exhaustion in her face. "Miss Montgomery," Marcus said, setting down the cleaning cloth. "I didn't know you were home." "I got back a few minutes ago," she said. Her voice was still hoarse. "I wanted to talk to you." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He wondered if she'd noticed him looking at the balcony, if she knew he'd found the cigarettes. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Sarah crossed her arms. She looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize for the other night. I know I was rude when you knocked on my door." Marcus shook his head. "You weren't rude." "I was," Sarah said. "You were just trying to help and I shut you down. That wasn't fair." "You don't owe me an apology," Marcus said. "I'm just the guy who cleans your apartment." Sarah looked at him for a moment, then glanced away. "Still," she said, "I appreciate what you do. I know I don't say that enough." She turned and walked back toward her bedroom. Marcus watched her go, then picked up the cleaning cloth and went back to work. But the conversation stayed with him. There was something in her voice, something that sounded like guilt. 3 nights later, Marcus saw her again. This time she was sitting on the main balcony when he arrived. The sliding door was open and he could see her silhouette against the city lights. Marcus hesitated, then knocked lightly on the door frame. Sarah turned her head. "Sorry," Marcus said. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I can come back later." "No, it's fine," Sarah said. She stood up and walked inside, closing the door behind her. "I was just getting some air." She moved past him into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hand shook slightly as she lifted the glass to her lips. Marcus set down his vacuum and looked at her. "Are you feeling all right?" Sarah set the glass down on the counter. She looked at him, and for a moment he thought she might tell him the truth. But then she smiled and the moment was gone. "I'm fine," she said. "Just tired. Work has been busy." Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. Sarah picked up her glass and walked back toward her bedroom. She stopped at the doorway and looked back at him. "Thank you for asking," she said quietly. Then she closed the door. The next night, Marcus made a decision. He arrived at the penthouse at his usual time. Sarah wasn't home. He cleaned the kitchen, the living room, the hallways. Then he walked out to the secondary balcony and stood in front of the air conditioning unit. He pulled out the plastic bag and held it in his hands. He could throw it away, pretend he never saw it, go back to his routine and let Sarah Montgomery handle her own life. But he didn't. He put the bag back where he found it, went back inside and waited. Sarah came home around midnight. Marcus heard the front door open, heard her footsteps in the hallway. He was in the guest bathroom. He set down the sponge, dried his hands, and walked out into the hallway. Sarah was standing near the kitchen, setting down her purse. She looked surprised to see him. "Marcus," she said, "I thought you'd be gone by now." "I wanted to talk to you," Marcus said. Sarah's expression shifted. She looked guarded. "About what?" Marcus took a breath. He'd rehearsed this in his head a dozen times, But now that he was standing in front of her, the words felt clumsy and intrusive. "I found something," he said. "On the balcony, the small one around the side." Sarah's face went pale. She didn't say anything. "I wasn't snooping," Marcus continued. "I was just cleaning and I moved the chair and I saw the bag." Sarah stared at him, her jaw tightening. "You had no right to go through my things." "I didn't go through anything," Marcus said. "I found it by accident, but once I did, I couldn't just ignore it." Sarah crossed her arms. Her voice was cold now, defensive. "So what? You're going to lecture me. Tell me how bad smoking is for my health." "No," Marcus said. "I'm not here to lecture you." "Then what do you want?" Marcus looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the shame she was trying to hide behind anger. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said quietly. "Her lungs gave out. She smoked for 20 years, and by the time she tried to quit, it was too late. I watched her spend the last 6 months of her life struggling to breathe. I watched her die in a hospital bed." Sarah's expression softened. The anger faded, replaced by something else, something fragile. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," Marcus said. "I'm telling you because I recognize the signs. The cough, the mints, the air purifier, the mouthwash. You're trying to hide it, and I get that. But the symptoms you're having, the shortness of breath, the dizziness, I've seen them before." Sarah looked away. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "It's not that simple," she said. "I know," Marcus said. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she walked over to the couch and sat down. She looked small sitting there in her expensive apartment, surrounded by all her success. "Do you know what people would say if they found out?" she asked, her voice shaking now. "If they knew I smoked?" Marcus sat down in the chair across from her. "They'd judge me," Sarah continued. "They'd say I was weak, undisciplined, hypocritical. I run a company that makes software for hospitals. I give talks about health and wellness and productivity, and I can't even stop smoking." She let out a bitter laugh. "I've tried," she said. "I've tried so many times, but every time I quit I fall apart. I can't sleep. I can't focus. I can't handle the pressure. So I go back to it and I tell myself I'll quit later when things calm down, when I'm not so stressed." She looked at Marcus and her eyes were wet. "But things never calm down, and I'm so tired of pretending I have everything under control." Marcus didn't say anything. He just sat there, letting her talk. "I know it's killing me," Sarah said. "I know I'm not fine, but if I admit that, if I ask for help, everyone will know I'm a fraud. They'll know I'm not who they think I am." "You're not a fraud," Marcus said gently. "You're just human." Sarah shook her head. "You don't understand. My whole life is built on this image. If that falls apart, everything falls apart." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm not going to tell anyone. That's not why I'm here. I just wanted you to know that I see what's happening, and if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." Sarah looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked like she believed him. "Why do you care?" she asked. Marcus thought about his wife, about the nights he spent sitting beside her hospital bed, wishing he'd said something sooner. "Because I didn't say anything last time," he said, "and I've regretted it every day since." Sarah wiped her eyes. She didn't say anything, but she nodded. Marcus stood up and picked up his cleaning supplies. "I'll finish up and get out of your way." He walked toward the kitchen, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Marcus." He turned around. "Thank you," she said. Marcus nodded, then he went back to work. Over the next week, things were different. Sarah didn't avoid him anymore. She started leaving her bedroom door open. She made small talk when he arrived. She asked him about his daughter, about his life outside of work. Marcus answered her questions, but he didn't push. He didn't bring up the cigarettes again. He just did his job and let her know he was there if she needed him. But the cough didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. One night Marcus arrived to find Sarah sitting on the couch, her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard him come in, and he could see the exhaustion written all over her face. "Bad day?" Marcus asked. Sarah let out a long breath. "Bad week." Marcus set down his supplies and sat down across from her. "You want to talk about it?" Sarah shook her head. "Not really." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sarah spoke. "I went to the doctor yesterday," she said. "They ran tests, blood work, lung function, everything." Marcus waited. "They said I'm fine," Sarah continued. "Physically, there's nothing wrong with me. The dizziness, the shortness of breath, it's all stress, apparently. They told me to exercise more, meditate, take a vacation." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They don't know about the smoking," she said. "I didn't tell them." Marcus looked at her. "Why not?" "Because then it would be real," Sarah said. "If I tell them, it goes in my medical records. It becomes part of my history, and I can't let that happen." Marcus didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell her that her health was more important than her image, that hiding the truth was only going to make things worse, but he knew she already knew that. "I'm scared," Sarah said quietly. "I'm scared that if I stop, I won't be able to function, and I'm scared that if I don't stop, I'm going to end up like your wife." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. "You're not going to end up like her, not if you do something about it now." Sarah looked at him. "How do I do that?" "One step at a time," Marcus said. "You don't have to quit tomorrow. You don't have to tell the world. You just have to be honest with yourself, and maybe with one other person." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Marcus said. "I've seen you run a company. I've seen you give speeches. I've seen you hold it together when everything around you is falling apart. You're stronger than you think." Sarah wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "What if I fail?" "Then you try again," Marcus said. "That's all any of us can do." 2 nights later, everything fell apart. Marcus arrived at the penthouse to find the lights off. He let himself in and turned on the hallway light. The apartment was silent, too silent. He called out, "Miss Montgomery." No answer. He walked through the living room, the kitchen, checking the rooms. She wasn't there. Then he heard it, a faint sound coming from the elevator lobby. Marcus ran out into the hallway and found Sarah sitting on the floor, her back against the wall. She was gasping for air, her face pale and slick with sweat. Her hands were shaking. "Sarah," Marcus said, dropping to his knees beside her. "What happened?" "I can't breathe," she whispered. "I can't." Her voice broke off as another fit of coughing took over. Marcus pulled out his phone, ready to call 911, but Sarah grabbed his wrist. "No," she said. "No ambulance, please." "You need help," Marcus said. "Not like this," Sarah said. "Not here, please." Marcus looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes, the shame. He put his phone away and helped her to her feet. "Come on, let's get you inside." He guided her back into the penthouse and sat her down on the couch. He got her a glass of water, made her drink it slowly. He stayed with her until her breathing steadied, until the color came back to her face. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were red and swollen. "I thought I was going to die," she said. Marcus sat down beside her. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." Sarah shook her head. "I can't keep doing this." "I know," Marcus said. She looked at him and he saw something break in her expression. All the walls she'd built up, all the control she'd clung to, it crumbled. "I need help," she whispered. Marcus reached out and took her hand. "Then let me help you." The next morning, Marcus came back to the penthouse. He hadn't slept. He'd gone home after Sarah finally fell asleep on the couch, but he kept thinking about the look on her face in the elevator lobby. He knocked on the door at 9. Sarah opened it almost immediately. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said. "I told you I would," Marcus said. Sarah stepped aside and let him in. They sat down at the kitchen table. Marcus had brought coffee from the shop downstairs. He set a cup in front of her and she wrapped her hands around it but didn't drink. "I don't know where to start," Sarah said. "You don't have to start anywhere," Marcus said. "We can just sit here if that's what you need." Sarah looked at him. "You should have called 911 last night. I could have died." "But you didn't," Marcus said. "You don't know that," Sarah said, her voice sharp now, defensive. "You're not a doctor. You're not qualified to make that call." Marcus nodded. "You're right, I'm not, but you asked me not to and I listened. If that was the wrong choice, then I'm sorry." Sarah looked down at her coffee. The sharpness faded from her voice. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have snapped at you. You were just trying to help." "You don't have to apologize," Marcus said. "You're scared, I get it." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then she spoke. "I've been smoking since I was 19, she said. "I started in college. Everyone did it back then. It was just something you did at parties when you were stressed, when you needed a break. I told myself I'd quit after graduation, then after I got my first job, then after I started my company, but I never did." She finally took a sip of her coffee. "It got worse when the company took off," she continued. "The pressure was constant. Board meetings, investor calls, product launches. I couldn't afford to fall apart, so I smoked to keep myself steady. It became the only thing that made me feel like I could breathe." Marcus listened without interrupting. "I know how stupid that sounds," Sarah said. "Smoking to feel like I can breathe, but it's true. When I don't have it, I feel like I'm drowning, like everything is spinning out of control." "It's not stupid," Marcus said. "It's addiction, that's how it works." Sarah looked at him. "How did your wife quit?" Marcus felt the old ache settle in his chest. "She didn't. Not really. She stopped smoking when the doctors told her she had to, but by then it was too late. The damage was done." Sarah's face fell. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked." "It's okay," Marcus said. "I want to talk about it. I want you to understand what happens if you don't stop." He set his coffee down and leaned forward. She spent the last 6 months of her life hooked up to oxygen. She couldn't walk across the room without getting winded. She couldn't play with our daughter. She couldn't do anything. And the worst part was watching her realize that she'd done it to herself, that if she just stopped sooner, she might have had more time. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't wipe them away. "I don't want that to be you," Marcus said. "I don't want you to look back in 5 years and realize you could have done something, because you can. Right now, you still have time." Sarah took a shaky breath. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," Marcus said, "but you don't have to do it alone." Sarah looked at him, and for the first time she looked like she believed him. Over the next few weeks, Marcus came to the penthouse during the day instead of at night. Sarah had taken time off from work. She told her assistant she was dealing with a personal matter and needed space. She didn't tell anyone else. Marcus didn't clean during those visits. He just sat with her. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. He brought her water when she needed it. He stayed with her when the cravings got bad. The first few days were the hardest. Sarah was restless, irritable, exhausted. She snapped at him more than once, and each time she apologized afterward. Marcus told her it was fine. He'd seen it before. He knew it wasn't personal. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," Sarah said one afternoon. She was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest. "I can't think, I can't sleep, I can't do anything." "It gets easier," Marcus said. "Not right away, but it does." "How long did it take your wife?" Sarah asked. Marcus thought back. A few weeks before the physical symptoms eased up. A few months before she stopped thinking about it all the time. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "A few months, great." "I know it feels impossible right now," Marcus said. "But you're doing it. You haven't smoked in 5 days, that's something." Sarah looked at him. 5 days doesn't mean anything if I go back to it tomorrow." "Then don't go back to it tomorrow," Marcus said. Just focus on today. On the 8th day, Sarah broke down. Marcus arrived to find her sitting on the balcony, the same balcony where he'd found the cigarettes weeks ago. She wasn't smoking, but she was holding something in her hand. He walked over and saw that it was a pack of cigarettes, unopened. "I bought them this morning," Sarah said, her voice flat, emotionless. "I walked to the store and I bought them and I came back here and I've been sitting here for 2 hours trying to decide if I'm going to open them." Marcus sat down in the chair beside her. He didn't say anything. "I don't know if I can do this," Sarah said. "I thought I could, but I don't know anymore." Marcus looked at the pack in her hand. "Do you want to open them?" Sarah stared at the pack. "Yes and no, I don't know." "What would happen if you did?" Marcus asked. Sarah's hands tightened around the pack. "I'd feel better for about 10 minutes, and then I'd feel worse, because I'd know I failed." "You haven't failed," Marcus said. "I bought cigarettes," Sarah said. "That's failing." "You bought them, but you haven't smoked them," Marcus said. "That's not failing, that's fighting." Sarah looked at him. Her eyes were red and her face was pale. "I'm so tired of fighting." "I know," Marcus said, "but you're still here, that means something." Sarah stared at the pack for a long time. Then she stood up, walked over to the railing and threw it over the edge. Marcus watched it fall 38 stories and disappear into the street below. Sarah turned around and looked at him. She was crying now, really crying, and she didn't try to hide it. "I don't want to die," she said. Marcus stood up and walked over to her. "You're not going to." Sarah covered her face with her hands and let herself cry. Marcus stood beside her and let her. He didn't try to fix it. He just stayed. After that day, things got easier. Not easy, but easier. The cravings were still there, but they were less intense. Sarah started sleeping better. The cough began to fade. The dizziness came less often. Marcus still came by a few times a week, but the visits were shorter now. Sarah didn't need him to sit with her all day anymore. She was finding her footing. One afternoon, Marcus arrived to find Sarah sitting at her desk in the spare room. She had her laptop open and was typing something. She looked up when he came in. "Hey," she said. She looked different, more rested, more alive. "Hey," Marcus said. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Sarah said. "Not perfect, but better." Marcus smiled. "That's good." Sarah closed her laptop and turned to face him. "I've been thinking about going back to work. Not full-time, not yet, but maybe a few hours a day, just to ease back into it." "That sounds like a good idea," Marcus said. Sarah nodded. "I'm nervous. I don't know how I'm going to handle the stress without," she stopped herself, "without the crutch." "You'll figure it out," Marcus said. "You've made it this far." Sarah looked at him. "I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus shook his head. "Yes, you could have, you just didn't have to." Sarah stood up and walked over to him. She held out her hand. "Thank you." Marcus shook her hand. "You're welcome." 3 months later, Sarah gave a talk at a health and wellness conference in San Francisco. Marcus didn't go, but he watched the recording online. He sat in his mom's living room in Bronzeville, Jasmine asleep on the couch beside him, her head resting against his arm. Sarah stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and talked about mental health, about the pressure to appear perfect, about the cost of hiding who you really are. She didn't mention smoking, she didn't mention Marcus, but she talked about asking for help, about admitting when you're not okay, about the strength it takes to be vulnerable. At the end of the talk, someone in the audience asked her what the hardest thing she'd ever done was. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Admitting I needed help," she said, and then actually accepting it. Marcus turned off the recording and sat back in his chair. He thought about his wife, about the things he wished he'd said, the things he wished he'd done. He thought about Sarah standing on that stage telling the truth. He thought about the fact that sometimes the thing that saves you isn't a cure or a solution. It's just another person who sees you and refuses to look away. A week later, Marcus got a text from Sarah. It was the first time she'd ever texted him outside of work. The message was short, 4 months, still going, thank you. Marcus smiled and put his phone away. He didn't reply, he didn't need to. The next time he saw Sarah was at the penthouse. He'd gone back to his regular night shift, and she was home when he arrived. She opened the door and smiled at him. "Marcus," she said, "come in." He walked inside and the apartment looked the same as it always had. Clean, organized, perfect. But this time it didn't feel empty. Sarah walked over to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. She handed one to Marcus. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. Marcus set his cleaning supplies down and took the glass. "What's that?" "I told my board," Sarah said, "about everything, about the smoking, about taking time off, about needing help." Marcus looked at her surprised. How did they react? Sarah smiled. "Better than I expected. They were supportive. One of them even told me she'd gone through something similar. We talked for an hour." "That's good," Marcus said. "It is," Sarah said. "I spent so long being afraid of what people would think, and it turns out most of them just wanted me to be okay." Marcus nodded. "People surprise you sometimes." Sarah looked at him. "You did." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just smiled. Sarah set her glass down and walked over to the window. She looked out at the city, at the lights stretching out in every direction. "I used to think weakness was the worst thing you could be," she said, "but I was wrong. The worst thing you can be is alone." Marcus stood beside her and looked out at the city too. "You're not alone." Sarah turned to him and smiled. "I know." They stood there for a moment, looking out at the lights. Then Marcus picked up his cleaning supplies and got to work. And for the first time in a long time, the penthouse felt like a place where someone actually lived. Sometimes the thing that kills you isn't the habit itself. It's the fear of being judged when you need help the most. And sometimes the person who saves you isn't a doctor or a therapist or a miracle. It's just someone who sees the truth and refuses to let you face it alone.